السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. بسم الله الذي لا إله سواه، الواحد الأحد الصمد الذي لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد، والحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه، حمدا يليق به وجلاله وكماله في جماله وجلاله، حمدا يليق بجزيل نعمائه وعطائه، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف وأنبل وأكرم أنبيائه سيدنا محمد الصادق الأمين الرسول المبين المبعوث رحمة للعالمين، وعلى آله الطاهرين الطيبين وأصحابه الغر الميامين والتابعين لهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين، آمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم افتح مسامع قلوبنا لذكرك. Oh Allah, please open the hearing channels of our hearts to that which reminds us of you. Oh Allah, please do not entrust us to our own inclinations, our own drives, our own likes or dislikes. Please do not entrust us to anything of your creation except to your most benevolent, merciful, loving care. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. And I remind myself and you, my dear brothers and sisters, that in this life, the ideal which is reachable, this ideal, is to always be aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is to always be aware internally of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and therefore of how He manifests Himself subhanahu wa ta'ala through His attributes in life. And therefore everything we experience, everything we live, everything we're exposed to, opportunities or challenges, adversities or prosperities, all of that are simply expressions and manifestations of His attributes subhanahu wa ta'ala through His acts subhanahu wa ta'ala. And to be able to live in a full awareness of that, that is Tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal. That is the active way of the realization of the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our lives. May Allah Azza wa Jal help us always be that way. And in that we have always, hopefully, to be basking and moving, being cradled between the dictates of the Sharia, the rational aspects of the law, and between the spiritual aspects of the law or the haqiqah. That we need to be always between the two. Sometimes one is more aware of one side than the other. Those of us who are seeking Him Azza wa Jal, sometimes we are more aware and profoundly touched by the rational aspects of the law, and sometimes by the spiritual aspects of our faith. And the luckiest, nay, not the luckiest, rather, those who are most balanced and the happiest, perhaps in the noble sense of happiness, are those who, would you say what? Have both, are in both at the same time. In both at the same time. And so, what we began to cover last time from the Sharia axioms, the qawa'id, some of the axioms of fiqh though they have to do with the Sharia rational aspect of the law, as they are used by the experts in courts and in fatawi and so on, but they have one would be benefiting most, the one who has that realization, but also sees in that spiritual applications, mundane, daily applications as well. And it is for that purpose that I felt, to share with you some of these essential basic axioms of Islamic jurisprudence, some of those essential qawa'id fiqhiyya. Remember, not because I and you are muftis or are, qudah or are special judges, it helps, but most importantly, in addition to our regular fiqh concerns, that we see in that also a way very, very useful to help us in our regular lives and in our spiritual also dimensions of our lives, applying these rules and understanding them that way. What is the first rule we talked about? Without looking, what's the first rule? You should know it by now. اليقين لا يزول بالشك. اليقين لا يزول بالشك. That certitude cannot be removed by doubt. And it has tremendous applications at all levels, not only, as I said, at the level of the fatawi, or at the level of qada, at the level of giving legal opinions, or at the level of adjudicating between different parties in a court of law, but in our regular lives as well and in our spiritual lives. And we gave a few examples. Sometimes I was sitting here and يَقُولُ لَا يَزُولُ بِالشَّكٍّ, and somehow this came to my heart many times, so I thought maybe this means it's good enough to share it with you. الْيَقِينُ لَا يَزُولُ بِالشَّكٍّ. الْيَقِينُ لَا يَزُولُ بِالشَّكٍّ. SubhanAllah. Let's look at ourselves at this age, you or I. Many of us, or all of us, have gone to some schooling. We have learned different disciplines, different subjects. Math, physics, astronomy, sociology, history, whatever, psychology, chemistry, biology, economics, finance, political science. We have learned things, grammar. So, alhamdulillah, it's useful. And that sometimes began to develop inside of us a sort of a tendency in viewing the world. Sometimes what we learn begins to bring to us what? Doubt about other things. Sometimes what we learn may bring to us certitude about other things. But it brings doubt in many matters. And then as I was pondering that, and we are born in this dunya. And if we look at our personal experiences in the most innocent and the simplest of ways, the concept that the world came into existence, I came into existence with a maker, not on account of blank, not on account of coincidence. It's so natural in us. It's so natural in us. In other words, the concept or the fact that a creator exists is innate. That's why we call it in the Arabic language, in Islam, what? fitri. It's fitri matter. It is fitra. And you see, can you prove fitra? Can you prove fitra? That innate thing that's, sometimes you can't even express it in any language, let alone in a semi-mathematical formulation, or in a sort of logical, systematic Aristotelian approach, or even Ghazalian approach. It's natural. It's fitri. And yet, it is more profound than something I prove with, sometimes through mathematical, mountain of the proof. That's a yaqeen. You think about it, do that, go home now, sit and try to perhaps grasp this concept of yaqeen, innate yaqeen. Yaqeen is not necessarily born out of rational or mathematical proof that may lead to some form of yaqeen, depending on the subject matter discussed. But this yaqeen that we develop is natural. If you think about it and you spend time doing that, we spend time doing that through dua and so on, then we may begin to develop the notion of wijdani yaqeen, something experiential of a certitude. Being in that state, and then we go to school and we learn and we read and we argue and we discuss and we hear, all of that, oftentimes, for many, it would generate what? Doubt. Doubt. And some of us doubt very quickly. Very quickly. Khalas, even if we doubt, and we should not in some instances, even if we doubt, remember this rule. This is a logical rule also. اليقين لا يزول بالشك. Even if you don't know how to counter that shubha, that challenge, which seems to be evidence, or which is actually only a semblance of evidence. That's why it's called shubha, semblance of evidence. Even if one at the moment is unable to respond properly to that challenge, because it's a specific one, then put it in the context of the rule of al-yaqeen la yazulu bil-shak. Certitude cannot be removed by doubt. Certitude cannot be removed by doubt. It's actually, of course, very logical. You cannot change something that you acquired through certitude by a challenge to it that is conjecture, or that is even more than conjecture, probabilistic. You know the difference between probabilistic and certain? Probability and certitude, right? Certitude in terms of probabilities equals to what? 1.0. And probabilistic in terms of numbers, what number would you put in there? Greater than? Probabilistic, greater than 0, less than, strictly less than 1. Probabilistic. More likelihood, more likely is in probabilistic terms what? Greater than 0.5 and strictly less than 1. You cannot, and that's something, it's very simple, very rational, but very simple. Certitude cannot be removed by doubt. Even if that doubt, rationally seems to be very interesting as even even probabilistic with a probability greater than 0.5, let's assume that. But doubt is 1 or very close to 1 in terms of probabilistic terms. So I cannot, rationally, I cannot ignore something that I acquired with yaqeen for something I developed with shak, with doubt, even if it were probabilistic. وَالْيَقِينُ لَا يَزُولُ بِالشَّكِّ. SubhanAllah, that's why in the spiritual realm, some of our spiritual teachers who were also brilliant minds, were brilliant minds as well rationally. One of them would say, after they lived their lives and in contemplation, both of the rational realm and the spiritual realm, and they mean that, they say, I think of whom is Imam al-Ghazali probably in some of his works and others, rahimahullah ta'ala. I doubt my being, my existence, and I do not doubt the divine being and existence. In other words, my existence and my reality needs proof, not divine existence and reality. This is how, this is, from that yaqeen now, this is how they view the world. This is how they view everything. And that's why you hear them sometimes saying, something like, does he need evidence? The one who is evidence for everything else? وَكَفَى بِاللَّهِ شَهِيدًا. وَكَفَى بِاللَّهِ شَهِيدًا. It suffices for God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be the shaheed, the witness. وَكَفَى بِاللَّهِ عَلِيمًا, and so on and so forth. So it suffices that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a shaheed. That's why when we have not reached certitude yet, we are of those, alhamdulillah at least, who observe creation, and from observing the creation, infer and are led to the existence of a creator. Clear? That's usually how most of us are. من الأثر, as they say, إلى المؤثر. من الأثر إلى المؤثر. From the relics, from the created realm, you move to the المؤثر, the originator, the creator, the maker. But then it's the opposite. من المؤثر إلى الأثر. Because of their maqam of certitude, they move not from the creation towards the creator, but from the creator to the creation. With their certitude in the creator, they move to understand the creation, not the opposite. For them, that's the yaqeen. From the yaqeen position, they move to everything else. And the yaqeen is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's being and existence. Everything else is contingent upon that, of course. And therefore they move in their lives, these special human beings, they move in their lives, they navigate in this life, in all aspects of their lives, from the position of the certitude about the Creator to understanding the creation. اليقين لا يزول بالشك. And that's why sometimes they say, rahimahullah ta'ala, for them, again, this is not about evidence and rational evidence about Allah. They say, we have seen God. Oh, this is a big statement. We have seen God. We have the certitude of the one who has seen God. But what do they mean by that? They don't mean we have seen God with our physical eyes. تعالى الله عن ذلك علوا كبيرا. May Allah be exalted from that, because Allah is not in space or in time in the way we understand in and space and time. I had said three things: the way you understand in and space and time. But He is the creator of space and time and in and out. It's all a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those who say that, rahimahumullah ta'ala, we have seen God, that is, with their spiritual eye. It's not in the physical realm. With their spiritual eye, the eye of certitude. And they develop a certitude that is wujdani, experiential, which is beyond the rational only. And it is related, the ulama have related that Sayyiduna Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he was asked, did you see God? Probably in the experience, in the spiritual sense. He said, how could I worship someone I have not seen? He answered, it is recorded, how could I worship someone I have not seen? Something I have not seen. That doesn't mean, again, he's saying I have, like, most, lay of us would perhaps think. No. Eye of his qalb has seen that. In other words, he is in the level of yaqeen. Yaqeen, that is, for the lay amongst us, yaqeen is only when we see something physical, because we are too physical. We are too thick, too dense, too kathif. We are, that is physically and materially speaking, we are not latif. We are not, latif. We're not angelic. We're not nawrani. We're not rawhani. So everything has to do with the kathif, the dense. If it is not kathif, if it is not dense, we don't know it. It doesn't exist. But those whose qulub and beings are latif, in the realm of the latif, like the angels, they see what we don't see. They hear what we don't hear. And therefore they conceive of that which we do not conceive of, because we are too blocked with the thickness, with the density of our materialistic connections and attachments. They are free from that. Therefore they are not dense. They are latif. So they can see through, the confines of time. Past, present, and future is not like past, present, and future. Subhanallah. And we can say so more about this beautiful concept of al-yaqinu la yazulu bishak. Please do remember, my dear brothers and sisters, in life, in the spiritual realm, first of all, when we're faced with any challenge, it's normal. This is life. And his life is meant to be challenging also at all levels. And we even gave examples about family life and work life. Remember, keep that in mind when we are challenged by certain occurrences or events. Sometimes applying this principle, even if we don't know the actual fiqh rule, and we know this principle, it helps us make the right decision. Al-yaqinu la yazulu bishak. And then in terms of application at the level of fiqh and so on, of course someone, let's say, is is an heir to someone else, and that is an heir to A, and that person, someone else A, disappears for some time. What do? We haven't seen them for a while, months, a year, 2, 3. What should happen? That's true. Because the last thing we saw that he was living. And that continues to be. That was our yaqeen, our certitude. And we don't know for a fact that he or she died or not. Then the certitude that he was living cannot be simply removed by the conjecture or the doubt that we have about his or her death. And therefore their wealth is still to be preserved, not to be distributed among the heirs. If he's a man who had a wife, that wife is still his wife, should not be considered as available for marriage. All of that continues, unless there is evidence to the contrary. And this is simple, even if we don't know the rulings of that. And then maybe the issue goes to court and so on. That's a different issue, to use whatever available evidence there is, and that evidence to weigh it, whether this evidence is enough to remove the original certitude or not. What about this example? If someone comes to you and out of the blue, you don't remember anything, and he says, I confess, he says, I think that I owe you $1,000. A confession. But in which he says, I think I owe you $1,000. What happens here? Besides, that's anyone else? No? No. Just apply the rule, yes. Now I come back to you. I give a chance. Khalas, come back to you.
Because he is not certain, so he doubts his thing. So we know that before he made that statement, he was certain that he didn't owe him.
Beautiful. So that's the part that was certain. Bara'atu dhimma. Always. The part that is certain is bara'atu dhimma. Everyone is free from responsibility. Everyone is free from responsibility towards anything and anyone in the original state. So this is the original state. This is certitude that we started with. And then he comes, alhamdulillah, a nice good man, says, I think, because he said, I think. In other words, he's not sure himself. And sometimes it does happen, truly it does. I think I owe you. So the person hearing that should not go and say, begin to demand, Khalas, give me my $1,000. Well, I forgot, you confessed, you owe me $1,000. Let's make it more serious by saying, $100,000. No, I'm going to take you to court. You take me to court. The court reading that confession, if it is written or recorded, then hears that. The court has to rule in this case in favor of whom? Of the person who said, I think I owe you. In favor of him. In other words, you don't owe the man anything. In other words, the man cannot demand that to be his right on the basis of, he confessed. Because confession is very strong, of course, as evidence. But in this case, confession was about a shak, about a doubt, and expressed in doubt. And looking at the conditions in this way, there is no other evidence except the fact that in the original state, in the relationship between these two persons, there is no evidence whatsoever that he owed anything with certitude. Al-yaqinu la yazul bishak. That original innocence from responsibility, which is certain, cannot be removed by a confession based on doubt. Aynam. Whereas, for example, if somebody owed somebody something, an amount of money, A owed B an amount, and A died. After the death, the man B comes and claims that there is that debt has not been paid yet. Claims the debt has not been paid yet to the heirs of A. What's the ruling here on the basis of the axiom al-yaqinu la yazulu bishak? Who gives it a try from here? From here. I'm sorry? That's, you have to say that, yes. That was because we had certitude, yaqeen, before the man died, by evidence or his confession, that the debt is owed indeed to B by A. And A died, and then we don't know whether A paid the debt or not. We don't know. And there is no evidence for that. Then the debt still holds. The debt still holds. Even if the heir said, oh, it was paid. He paid it to you before he died. And he says, no, he didn't. And there is no evidence for that. Written evidence and with witnesses and so on. Proper evidence. Then al-yaqinu la yazulu bishak. That amount of money is still owed to the person. Very normal. Al-yaqinu la yazulu bishak. Aynam. Sometimes the expert scholars rahimahumullah ta'ala, when it comes to yaqeen in some cases, where yaqeen is impossible to have, but there is something close to yaqeen, something close to yaqeen. If that is there in some cases, that would play the role of yaqeen. And what is that called? What is that called? الظن الغالب. الظن الغالب. In other words, if we put it in numbers, in probabilistic terms, we said something spurious, false, completely false, probabilistically speaking, in terms of numbers, is how much? 0. And we said, and we said yaqeen, true yaqeen is in numbers how much? 100%. 1. Shak, we're not exact shak. We cannot go this way or this way. Is how much? Shak. Shak. 0.5. 0.5. 0.5. You don't know. 0.5 may belong here, it doesn't belong here, it doesn't belong there, it belongs to both. 0.5 probabilistically, just to bring it closer to our attention in numbers. You know, الظن الغالب, this dhann, this overwhelming probability is something not one, but close to one, somewhere in that range. الظن الغالب, and sometimes things can be, by evidence and by the statistical approach and by some studies, can be quantified, almost in numbers, almost. So that's الظن الغالب. So the rule sometimes says الظن الغالب may play the role, practically speaking, of يقين, of certitude. أي نعم. الظن الغالب قد يجري مجرى اليقين. الظن الغالب يجري مجرى اليقين. For example, as I said, a person disappeared earlier. A person disappeared and we don't know whether he died or she died or not. But what we know with this new information is that he was in a plane. Nowadays, لا قدر الله, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all. And sometimes what happens? And a plane crashed. And it happened, and we don't know where it crashed. Right? Remember? And we have no information at all about the passengers. Nobody was recovered. No plane was recovered. And it's gone. And what is certain, if it is certain, as an example, that there was a crash. Now, what does this do? Can we speak here of yaqeen, certitude, that the person died? No. Can we also speak of yaqeen that he is living or she is living? No. Can we speak about most probably he is living? No. But we may argue, in this case, by experience, by feeling, by ada, that most likely, very high evidence after these so many months now, that he's dead. This is an example, a strong example of what? Of dhannun ghalib. And thus, in this case, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give rahmah to all. In this case, the families would consider their loved one as, technically speaking, juristically speaking, as dead. If they so choose, because there are certain issues that have to be, for example, decided upon swiftly. After this time now, most likely that's what happened. This is an example of al-dhannu al-ghalib, and therefore inheritance comes at play. If there were children, if that person was a husband or wife, and all the shari'i legal consequences will apply as though the person is actually dead. This is al-hukmu alayhi bi al-maut. In other words, that is al-maut hukmi, not necessarily hissi. We don't know that. But the judgment is that that person is dead. Aynan. If a person in salah realizes that he had committed sahu, he or she had committed sahu, sahu in salah, you forgot something, you missed something, and then of course you know that you have to do, in this case, sujood al-sahu, performing 2 sajda for your sahu, and then you realize you forgot whether you performed your sahu or you didn't. Did it happen to anyone here? What do you do? On the basis of what rule, and if this rule applies, how would it apply? Pardon me? The salah all over again? لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لا ضرر ولا ضرار لا ضرر ولا ضرار يريد الله بكم اليسر ولا يريد بكم العسر. That's of course, if you don't know anything, well, that's of course the safest thing, because we don't know. Now assume we know some things, hopefully, and we know this rule. This rule comes very handy when you know it here. Yes?
We're certain that we forgot something, but we're not certain that we made the sahu sujood, so we do the sahu sujood.
Because sahu now, the sujood for the sahu, after we were certain of performing sahu, that we are certain to have to perform sujood sahu. We have to perform sujood sahu. That's we're certain about it. And then we're not sure whether we performed it or not. Therefore, al-yaqinu la yazulu bil-shak. I am sure I have to perform it after I forgot my sahu. And then I forgot whether I did it or not. Alhamdulillah, the only thing is that I have to do that sahu only, rather than repeat the entire salah. Al-yaqinu la yazulu bil-shak. Because in this case also, you did perform all your salah. That's for yaqeen, unless you're not sure whether you performed salah at all. So you're sure you have to perform all your salah, alhamdulillah, and you're sure that you did not miss a shart or a rukun, of course. But this is what happened. You're not sure whether you performed sajdat as-sahw on account of something you forgot. So you're not going to remove your certitude of having performed all salah because you have doubt about sahw. You do all salah back. It does not, alhamdulillah, it does not go that way. It's not consistent with the rationale of yaqeen and doubt in this matter. Aynam. One of the sub-rules of this rule is بقاء ما كان الأصل بقاء ما كان على ما كان. That is, one of those axioms is that the origin of things is always assumed to continue, unless there is evidence to the contrary. الأصل بقاء ما كان على ما كان. The origin of things as it has been happening is always assumed to continue. If at one point we are not sure whether it is continuing or not, and we don't have evidence that it is not continuing, then it is always assumed that it continues. Again, like we said earlier, somebody was living and we're not sure whether they died. The rule is, al-asl is, baqa'u ma kana ala ma kan. That the origin of the condition remains and continues to be the way it is, etc. And of course there are some details sometimes about these matters which are very interesting, but the intent is not to go through some of those details, but to acquaint us with these, mashallah, with these principles, and to see how even at our levels, at the simple level, we can find them very useful in making some decisions in our lives. Not only in ibadat, but also in mu'amalat, in the way we interact with one another at home, at school, at work, in the masjid. If we know these rules and develop the feel of them, they would be very instrumental in making the right decisions in our lives. The other rule that we were also began to talk about through that major rule of لا ضرر ولا ضرار, remember? لا ضرر ولا ضرار. Everybody remembers that? Everybody remembers that? What does لا ضرر mean? That first part. لا ضرر. What? No harm. No harm. What does it mean, no harm? That's not a full sentence. The axiom can say that, but we have to understand it right. What does it mean? What do you understand from no harm? No harm, there are so many things that no harm means it doesn't exist. No harm. What do you mean? Yes. Sorry? We do not. Yeah, in other words, it is prohibited to initiate harm. It's forbidden to initiate harm. لا ضرر. And that's what it means. And what does لا ضرار mean? And لا ضرار? Pardon me? Don't reciprocate. That's good, but not good enough. Finish. Yes.
Don't retaliate for the purpose of harming.
For the purpose of harming, of inflicting pain. Do not reciprocate with the intent of inflicting pain, of inflicting harm. Don't reciprocate harm with the intent of inflicting harm. Again, someone's, as we say, for example, someone burns your, la qaddar Allah, burns your orchard. That's harm. They initiated harm. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. La darar in this case would be what? La dirar in this case would be what? That I, for example, do not go and what? Burn his orchard, because that's retaliation. And some people may call that what? Justice. That's in Islam called dirar. Then what to do? Khalas, I forgive him? Should I forgive him? Should I forgive him? Good. Okay. Yes, I may forgive him, and it's good to forgive him. Do I have to forgive him? No. So what do I do if I don't want to forgive? What to do? Go to see the course, the legal course. To go to the qada, to take care of that matter. In other words, that's the word we use in English, don't be what? A vigilante. Don't be a vigilante. Go to the qada to take care of that. Because why is that? Because usually when we don't do that, we always exceed the haqq. And we abuse our right to justice. Many human beings, if not most human beings, would abuse their own right for justice. And then would do dirar rather than adl, rather than justice. And therefore, rectify that through the means available of a court of law to decide in this case most likely what? A shari'i just court of law would do what? Compensation for the value destroyed and lost and whatever comes with that. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Yes, please. Yes. Yes. Then what? Then what do you think it should be? No, what do you think it should be? What would you do? Alhamdulillah, then a person like you will never worry. You will never worry. Allah will never give you up. Never. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. What you did is ihsan. Not only adl. You did ihsan. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Are there people like this? Are there people like this? Yes, there are, alhamdulillah. But not so many. But not so many. Nowadays especially. But still, if it's, what do? Either you do that, or you go burn their orchard. Can you do that? No, in Sharia, you cannot do that. That will never be justice. That will never be justice. So that's why al-mazlumu la yanbaghi an yadlim. The one transgressed against must not, in the pursuit of his or her own right, himself or herself commit injustice. No. That will lead to mischief and corruption on earth. Instead, one in this case, Allah watches. Allah watches. And we have many examples like that in history, of course. So, and then of that rule that we were talking, yes, لا ضرر ولا ضرار, of its يعني sometimes application, and it has rules that are sub-rules that belong to this general rule, لا ضرر ولا ضرار. For example, the rule of ارتكاب أخف الضررين لإزالة أشدهما. For example, that one may have recourse to the least harm in order to prevent the greater harm. One may have to have recourse to least harm to remove the greater harm. If one is faced between two choices, both of them are harmful. One of them is much more harmful than the other one. Let's say B is much more harmful than A as a choice. And one has to make either of those two choices. Then which one is to be taken? The lesser one. Especially if the removal of the greater one cannot be done without that other harm, that lesser harm. Can you imagine that? This happens a lot in life. Even as I said, if you think about it, there will be many examples at the family level, in disputes, in disagreements, and in so many levels. Please keep that in mind, even at the spiritual level and so on. So as an example, in the fiqhi sense, in the practical sense, for example, a woman is pregnant and the baby is in her womb and she's in her 7th month or 8 months or 9 months, and she dies, rahmahullah, and she dies. What's the first thing to think about? The baby. Save the baby. Save the baby. Our scholars a long time ago have talked about these issues. Can one perform then? It was talked about then centuries ago. They did cesareans necessarily, by necessity. Can one open her belly to get to the womb, to get to the child, to save the child? Of course, the answer would be, to us nowadays, obviously, yes. But that's not always so obvious, depending on the circumstances, because the sanctity of her body touching her body, the sanctity of her body, opening her body, bleeding her. That's a human body, and a body of a mu'min also, especially of a believing person. Can that be done? So they answer the question, because it's so serious, you just don't do that because she's dead. No, that's a human being, that's a mu'min, and that's a body that has its sanctity. So the only way to answer that is on the basis of these principles. That opening her body is harmful, is in some languages evil. It's harmful. But losing the life deliberately of the baby is even more harmful, worse than that. And therefore, to commit the lesser of the two evils, between letting the baby die and between dissecting the belly of the woman in her womb, those two are two difficult alternatives. Doing the dissection is allowed because it is the lesser of the two evils. The second one is to let the baby, what? Die. And that's a very powerful, beautiful example that, of course, everybody can agree to. But we have examples in our regular lives, in our regular decisions. If you look at that, you will see how often it is applied. That we, if we are aware, subhanAllah, and vigilant, and we have these things in our minds and hearts, they help us make the right decisions. Sometimes giving up something you are sure is right. Right? Giving up something you are sure is right. You give it up for the sake of something grander. Grander. Especially if one is faced between something very beneficial and something harmful. And I want that benefit, something very beneficial to me. And yet, sometimes I want it so bad, it's very beneficial. When I weigh the pros and cons, it comes also with something very harmful. So the requirement here is to get rid of the harmful first and give up the beneficial. Because if I take the beneficial, I will succumb to that harmful to me or to someone else, which is very serious, for example. So in family problems, in family relationships, give up certain things, not because they are wrong, they are right. And not because it is right, it has to happen. Even if it is right, it doesn't have to happen if it is countered or weighed by something that is as evil or even more evil. And that's why they say, the rule says what? Who remembers in this case? درء المفاسد أولى من جلب المصالح. درء المفاسد أولى من جلب المصالح. Warding off harm or evil takes precedence over drawing in benefit. That's a very, very important rule to keep in mind. Some of the examples our early scholars gave, practically speaking, and that existed. Let's say they say there is a mufti, scholar who is a mufti. You know what mufti is? Gives legal opinions, legal sharia opinions, halal and haram and this and that, etc. And they say al-mufti al-majin. الحجر على المفتي الماجن. if this mufti is majin, is very lax and immoral perhaps, and through a pattern he's very careless, and does not take this very, very seriously, this responsibility, that the qada, the courts of law, the superior courts of law, have the right, or may do what? Al-hijr alayh. That is, pass an order that this person cannot and must not issue fatawi. What's the rule here? درء المفاسد أولى من جلب المصالح. How does it apply here? His freedom to express himself is a right, is a manfa'a, is a benefit to him, and certainly to him at least. But in this case, this manfa'a, this maslaha of his, comes with something harmful, and harmful at the level of even the larger body of the community and of the society. And both are harms. Which harm is heavier? The harm of restraining him, or the harm of that ensues and gets to the public? The second one is worse. So we remove the harm of the second one by committing the first harm, that is by hijr, restraining order. A restraining order. And we have restraining orders in law, which Sharia, and it is here to stay. Restraining orders in a court of a spouse who is abusive to his spouse. Abusive, with evidence and so on. And then there is restraining order. Restraining order is not something comfortable. It's bad. It's harmful to the person. But relative to the harm he or she commits against the other party, that is outweighed. And therefore, the restraining order. درء المفاسد أولى من جلب المصالح, or دفع الضررين بارتكاب أخفهما, that removal of the harm by allowing the less of the harm, the two harms to exist. Inshallah ta'ala, it's time for salah, and perhaps a sister followed up with when we were speaking about opening the womb to save the baby. If we leave the baby in the belly of a dead mother, and in other words, do not take it out, then what is the ruling? What is the ruling? Is it a sin? The question is. Yes, it is a sin in this case. Yes, it is a sin in this case. In other words, to deliberately leave the baby inside to die. Knowingly, it is a crime. It is a sin in Sharia. As long as we know we could do that and we have the means to do that. No doubt about it. Even in the case of a living mother, let alone a dead mother. Dead mother, the example is easy to understand. A living mother is living. Alhamdulillah, she is pregnant. But some complications occur if we are sure now talking about sure, not, this is still theoretical. We are sure that the baby, if not taken out now, within the next, let's say, few hours or few days, the baby will die, the mother will be fine. Should we wait until the baby dies and then do what after that? In this case, one has still, because that's harm to the mother. Which harm is heavier? Loss of life of the very child of the mother? Or simply, a cesarean that will leave a scar, which is harm? Which one should overweigh? Of course, it has to be that way, even if the mother doesn't want. Even in this case, if the mother doesn't want. That has to happen to save that life, as long as that does not cause the mother to die, of course. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us understand what He wants from us to understand. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us see through the means that He provides for us in the Sharia, inshallah. Help us see those as means for our own happiness in this dunya, our own freedom in this dunya. May Allah help us understand them well and practice them well. And may Allah help us also see the other applications of these juristic axioms at the level of our everyday lives and at the level of our spiritual lives as well, inshallah ta'ala. If you have any questions, please you can write them or give them to me later, and we can address them when possible, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.